Look at you. You are all the heroes in my eyes, every single one of you who took your valuable time out to come here tonight. Thank you. Thank you. You're all emissaries of the Emet, of the truth. First of all, I want to thank the chairman of our board of directors, David Green, for his endless hours of selfless, tireless devotion to the cause of Israel and the Jewish people, the United States, and the free Western world as we know it. Next, I want to thank the vice chair of our board of directors, Lori Reagan, for her amazing legal, intellectual, emotional support, and for her deep and enduring friendship. Thank you, Lori. There are many volunteers that made this night a great success. But first and foremost, Jody Maisel, wherever you are. Jody, thank you. Melissa Siegel, Kuval Anglis, Lisa Magnus, Sheila Manovitz, Susan Orbach, and all the wonderful AEPI volunteers, and Jay Feldman and Andy Boris from AEPI. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And most importantly, to my wonderful, talented, and devoted husband, who is the wind beneath my wings, Buddy String. Buddy! On October 7th, we Jews once again were confronted with the sheer face of evil. Now, more and more stories are beginning to emerge of the hostages who were held deep beneath Gaza in 100 miles of their underground metro system of tunnels. Little Emily Hand, 9 years old, was held as a hostage for 50 days. Her mom died when she was 2 years old. Because Hamas would beat her when she spoke loudly, she can only speak in a whisper now. 12-year-old Eitan Yahalami was tortured and beaten with electric cables and forced to watch Hamas-made videos of the horrific events of October 7th and what happened to his family and his own community at gunpoint. God only knows what these children have endured and how they will ever heal. And the women who were raped and forced to parade naked in the streets amongst jeering crowds of Gazans, one has to ask, where are the women's rights organizations now? Where is the UN? This is barbarism at its very worst. Hamas's GoPro cameras recorded everything. Even the Nazis at least tried to cover up their tracks. And the Nazis didn't hide behind their own innocent civilians to commit their atrocities. Hamas made their goals abundantly clear: eradicating every single Jew and kafar infidel from the face of this earth. The Hamas charter states Allah is its target, the Prophet is its model, the Quran its constitution, jihad its path, and death for the sake of Allah is the loftiest of its wishes. Israel has absolutely no option but to fight this war against this utter sadistic savagery. This war is not about land or conquest or borders or territory or about one state or two. This is an existential war. This is a war about Israel's very existence against the darkest forces of evil imaginable. I do not know why, and I leave it to the rabbis and ministers and theologians and philosophers and the audience to explain, but every time there is a great evil that threatens the free world as we know it, whether Nazism, communism, or radical jihadism, we Jews are at the other side of the tip of the spear of hatred. And I have news for everyone here. They don't intend to stop with Israel and the Jews. This struggle that many narrowly cast as between the Palestinians and the Israelis is actually a global civilizational struggle, one between the current axis of evil, Iran, Russia, and China, and the survival of Western civilization. It's Iran that is at the center of the destabilization of the Middle East. And up until this very day, the centrifuges have not stopped spinning. Iran has equipped, trained, and along with Qatar, paid the salaries of the Hamas terrorists, many of whose leaders are sitting comfortably at the Ritz-Carlton Hotel in Doha today. It's at this point that I want to recognize Representative Andy Olgus, who is here somewhere today, who has legislation aimed at the slick, duplicitous country of Qatar. His bill, in essence, puts pressure on Doha, and he says, you can't have it both ways. Either you are with us or you're with the Hamas terrorists. Make no mistake, Israel and the brave men and women of the IDF are fighting for all of us here at home to keep our freedoms. And at this point, I want to just tell a story about my son-in-law, who is in the IDF up north in Hezbollah. On October 7th, Simchat Torah, which is supposed to be one of the most joyous days of the Jewish New Year, he came home from synagogue and said, I think there's a war going on. So he sat his children down and he said, I heard there are some really horrible things that are being done to Jews in Israel, and I promise to protect and defend our people. So I have to go up north. And his little girl, the oldest one, Eden, who's 9 years old, my oldest granddaughter, looked at him and said, Abba, Daddy, is this the last time I get to hug you? He is doing this for all of us here at home, here to protect our freedoms in America. There is a choice each one of us have to make. Either we're standing on the sidelines of history and letting the forces of darkness and totalitarianism prevail, and choosing your own self-selected facts through social media, or being on the side of accuracy and of the truth of the Emet. We at Emet have been working hard on certain things, on the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act, so that this will not be allowed to happen. We're proud to have Representative Mike Lawler here with us, as well as my hero, Congressman Ritchie Torres. We Jews have been through the darkest times conceivable for any one people. But we have the greatest moral resolve, both within Israel, within the IDF, and within the Jewish people. We have an indomitable spirit and sense of unity and of purpose imaginable. As Hanukkah approaches this Thursday evening, I think of the courageous Posner family of the German city of Kiel, who lit a Hanukkah menorah in their window in 1931, right across a Nazi headquarters. We are all here to light a candle in the darkness, even though the darkness of anti-Semitism seems dense and penetrating. And I have to thank every one of you who've come here tonight to support the valuable work of Emet, and every one of you are brilliant, shining rays of light in this darkness. We will fight, and we will win, and we will succeed because we must, or as they say in Hebrew, ein brera, there is no other choice. And one effervescent ray of light in this almost impenetrable darkness is that we have some incredibly courageous individuals who have spoken out in our own defense at their own personal peril. People like Representative Ritchie Torres, who Ritchie Torres has been excoriated by certain elements within his own party and has been emotionally and physically threatened, as has his very own mother, for his courageous, unlimited support for the state of Israel and the Jewish people. He has been behind every single important piece of legislation, and now it is my supreme pleasure to introduce you to one of my heroes, Representative Ritchie Torres.
Thank you, Sarah, just for those kind words, and I want to thank Emmett for everything you do to cast the light of truth into the darkness of disinformation and delegitimation against Israel as a Jewish state. And I'm honored to be an ally in the struggle against anti-Semitism. My name is Ritchie Torres. One of my local rabbis calls me Ritchie Torah. I've had a running joke all week. I said after the expulsion of George Santos, I'm the sole surviving Jewish member of Congress from New York. And one day I was at a barbecue. I'm so known for my pro-Israel advocacy among my friends. One day I was at a barbecue. I was about to grab a piece of meat, and a friend of mine said, "You do realize that's pork?" And I said, "You do realize I'm not actually Jewish," but people are often struck by the depth of my passion for Israel as a Jewish state, for the fight against anti-Semitism, and I'm commonly asked, why is a black Latino kid from the South Bronx so outspoken against anti-Semitism? And I'm convinced that people are asking me the wrong question. The right question is not why I have chosen to speak out. The right question is why have others chosen to be silent amid the deadliest day for Jews since the Holocaust? And the post-October 7th world in which we find ourselves reminds me of a quote from Dr. Martin Luther King, who once said that history will record that the greatest tragedy is not the stride and clamor of the bad people, but it's the appalling silence of the good people. And what we have seen from self-proclaimed progressives, from public officials, from college and university presidents and deans, from self-proclaimed women's rights activists, is nothing but appalling silence and indifference and cowardice in the face of barbaric anti-Semitism. And if we as a society cannot bring ourselves to condemn the cold-blooded murder of children and civilians with moral clarity, the butchering of babies with moral clarity, then we should ask ourselves, what are we becoming as a society? What does that reveal about the depth of anti-Semitism in the American soul? You know, October 7th has been an awakening for the Jewish community, but the time has come for a reckoning in America with the deepening rot of anti-Semitism on social media, in academia, in politics, in every aspect of American life. You know, now is not the time for silence and cowardice. Now is the time for moral clarity and moral common sense. You know, America is the greatest country in the world, but not even a country as great as the United States can, that's my theme song, I guess, can survive, not even a country as great as the United States can survive the loss of moral common sense. And we have, like, I never thought, as a New Yorker who lived through 9/11, I never thought I would live in a world where Osama bin Laden's letter to America is trending on TikTok among Americans. We have college campuses and social media platforms indoctrinating young Americans not only with a hatred for Israel, but with a hatred for their own country. And I'm not aware of a civilization in human history that has succeeded on the strength of self-loathing. You know, in Congress, there's a debate about whether there should be a ceasefire. There's a visible and vocal ceasefire caucus, of which I'm proudly not a member. But the truth is that there's no greater supporter of a ceasefire than Hamas. And Hamas supports a ceasefire not because it has any concern for Palestinian life, which it happily uses as a human shield. Hamas supports a ceasefire because a ceasefire would enable Hamas to rearm and regroup and launch an even deadlier terrorist attack than the one we saw on October 7th. And we know this because Hamas has said as much. It has said that October 7th is just a rehearsal. And it's worth noting that no one expected the United States to enter into a ceasefire with Imperial Japan when 2,400 Americans were murdered on Pearl Harbor. Or no one expected the United States to enter into a ceasefire with Nazi Germany when Adolf Hitler declared war on the United States. And no one expected the United States to enter into a ceasefire with the Taliban and Al-Qaeda when 3,000 Americans were murdered on 9/11. So why should Israel, the world's only Jewish state, be an exception to the rule of self-defense? Those who insist that Israel forfeit the right of self-defense are holding the Jewish state to a dangerous double standard that no other country, including the United States, would ever impose on itself. I want to say a few words about Iran. As far as I'm concerned, the Islamic Republic of Iran is the root of all evil in the Middle East. Wherever you have a failed state, whether it's Yemen, Lebanon, Iraq, Syria, a place like Gaza, you have the tentacles of Iran. There would be no greater breakthrough for peace in the Middle East than the end of the Islamic Republic of Iran. And for a long time, we had this wishful thought that if only we integrate Iran with the international community, it will moderate over time. But history has shown us the opposite. As China became more integrated with the West, it became more emboldened in its authoritarianism, not less. As Russia became more integrated with the West, it became more emboldened in its authoritarianism, not less. There is no reason to think that Iran is an exception to the rule. The lesson of history is that enriching your enemies does not make them your friends, it simply makes them more powerful enemies. And then I'll end on this note because I know I'm overstaying my welcome. Well, I've never been booed for underspeaking. That's great. But, you know, despite the overwhelming shock and grief of this moment, there is no doubt in my mind that Israel will emerge from this tragedy better and stronger, more resilient and more unified than ever before. You know, history tells us that resilience is both the DNA and destiny of the Jewish people and the Jewish state. Israel will succeed on the strength of the U.S.-Israel relationship. It will outlive its enemies. It will endure for the next 75 years and beyond. Am Israel High. Thank you.